Hello and welcome back to the shop. So today we are going to repair the sliding gear shaft and ball detent on the 13-inch lathe. So the sliding gear itself is specific only to the single tumbler models, and you can kind of think of it as a high range and low range kind of selector. So that sliding gear pushed in will give you the speeds for the top half of the gear chart, and that sliding gear pulled out will give you the speeds and feeds for the lower part of the gear chart. Now there are two grooves that a ball bearing, a ball detent rides in. One of them, the high speed one, which is all the way in, is pretty worn, so that shaft kind of floats around and the gear actually ends up rubbing up against the banjo. And the spring that actually holds the ball detent down so it can actually clip into place and hold the gear, that is broken, so we have to remake that. So it's not a huge project, but something kind of interesting. On another note, a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I went to the doctors and we found out what we're having. Well, we know we're having a kid, but we found out what kind of kid we're having. And we are having a girl, so that is going to be interesting. And sure, everything will go well, but it's definitely going to be interesting. And everything is carrying on fine. Everything looks fine health-wise right now. And we're looking for a due date in late May. So around then is when I will be having a daughter. So with that said, why don't we go over the workbench and we'll take a look at the problem that we're having and a couple ways to fix it and the way we're going to fix it. Alright, so here's the shaft for the sliding gear, and here is the sliding gear itself. It fits on there like so, and this is part of the gear train. This is what adjusts basically the major ranges of your gearbox on a single tumbler machine. So there's a ball detent right behind this little spring, which is actually broken. Okay, so we got to fix that. I may have a piece of suitable stock around here to make something. If not, I can just get something and do it later, but that's not a big thing. The biggest thing is that little ball detent that's in there sits on one of these two grooves. So there's one right here, and then there's one right here. And it basically slides back and forth and locks into those. So the first one is nice and tight, and I'm just putting pressure on that ball bearing with my thumb. The second one, when it comes over, not so much, okay? And the reason for that is as you can see, hopefully, let me zoom you in. You can see it's kind of gnarled, it almost has like two grooves, one groove here, and then the main groove that it had. Alright, so I want to get rid of that. Now I'm not really worried about these grooves in the middle. That's just from somebody kind of probably having it halfway in and out of play and running it on this section. But this section here is fine, and this section here is fine, which is where the actual gear will ride. If you look inside there, if I can get a shot inside, you can see that little bearing surface isn't all the way through, and it has a nice felt in there. So there are a few ways to fix this. There's the way that I'm going to do, where we just braze up this groove and remachine it. You can also cut down this entire thing, take out this groove and this groove, or just this groove, and sleeve over it and remachine that. Or you can remake the whole new part. If you do remake the part, you got to thread the end, and then you also have a oil through hole passage from there into right there. So I'm going to braze this over. Now I can't really just take a form tool, which is I ground to be the radius of that ball, fits in there nice. I can't just take it and go in there a little bit deeper, because if you look at the way that is, even if I did that, I'd be really deep. You can kind of see there how far I would have to go. It's really kind of bent over and gnarled up to pretty much right there. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm just going to go over to the 9-inch. I'm going to do it off camera, just so I don't have to reset the camera. And all I'm going to do is just take this tool, and I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to plunge in a little bit deeper than the groove is there. I'm going to bring it over to the side and then over to the other side and just widen it up a hair to get rid of all this nastiness there, and then we can remachine the groove. I want to make sure that I go a little bit deeper and a little bit wider than our groove is actually going to be, because when we remachine it, I want to be into our braze and only our braze. I don't want to come down to the base metal and end up catching a lip on the braze and kind of like flicking it off. Okay, so now we're just going to braze that up. I do not have an oxyacetylene torch, and I really have no use for one at the moment, so there's no point in me buying one. But I do have my turbo torches from work. This one's actually slightly smaller than I would like. I can't find my big fat one. I had a number 11 tip somewhere. I don't know where it ended up. Either way, this should work. It's just going to take a little bit to heat it up. Alright, so I tried using this tip, and it kind of worked, but it didn't get it quite as hard as it should be, and even though it covered it, it had a lot of spaces and gaps in it once I started cutting it. So I just carved all that out, and this is going to be try number 2, hopefully the last one. And I actually managed to find Large Marge here, even though she's been dead for 5 years. And we will be using this. And I also found, I forgot about this old chuck that pretty much should never be used as a chuck again. And we're going to hold it in that, and it'll allow me to spin it. And so hopefully this will work out. Now I'm definitely going to need earplugs this time, because this sucker is loud. So let me zoom you guys in just a hair, and we'll see how this works. Okay, it's ugly, but it's covered, and it got hot enough to really flow in there. This torch might have been a shade too big. I probably could have done with a little bit smaller, something kind of in between sizes, but we're using what we got. So I'm going to let that cool down, and then we'll head on over to the lathe, and we'll straighten that all out. Okay, so I have this in the lathe now, and I have it running as true as possible. I trued up this, and then kind of split the difference here. It's running within, if I 4-point it, running within about 1,000. There is wear on the shaft because it's a spinning shaft, so no way of getting around that unless you redo the whole thing. So what I'm going to do right now is just come in here, and I'm going to even out our braze there. I'm just using high-speed steel here just because it is an interrupted cut. This actually kind of is a bit of a pointy bit here. Okay, that's it. So you can see right there is our braze. Like I said, this here is just a little bit more. Right here, there's a little bit of a lip. I'm just starting to drag right on the steel there. So what I think I'm going to do is just polish it up with a piece of sandcloth, and we'll call that good. So I'm going to polish it up with the sandcloth. I'm going to get all this flux off. We can blend this side in a little bit better. And then I will mark this for our groove, and then we can groove it. Like I said, when I put this in, this is about as true as it's ever going to get. There is wear on this, and it's probably not perfectly round. I just split the difference in the wear, so that's why there's a little bit more braze on one side than the other, but for what this is, it's not going to make any bit of difference. Okay, so I know you guys might not be able to see it, but there's a mark there that I marked out the distance I need that groove. That mark is in the middle of my tool, and we're just going to plunge in and eyeball the depth to match this one. It's not super critical, it just needs to cradle that ball bearing. Okay, that depth looks really good, and I'm just gonna let it clean itself up a little bit there and just give a tweak to the left and a tiny tweak to the right. Now all I'm gonna do is get some fine paper. And I'm just going to make sure there isn't any kind of ridge. On either side of that. And there we go, that's pretty good. Okay, so now we got to remake the little kind of spring and put pressure on that ball bearing. Now it cracked right where the screw goes. So what I just did is took a piece of feeler gauge. This is from one of those fold-out feeler gauges, and drilled a hole in it. Now you can see the hole is offset, but when I put it up to here, it fits nice right over that hole and touches the end of that gear. So now we have to kind of form the radius on this. Now I don't think I'll need to heat it up. I think it'll have enough to bend around it. In this old back gear here, this here is 100 thousandths larger radius than that. But so what I'm going to try to do right now is just clamp this to it with a clamp and bend it around and see if that holds. If not, I can heat it up using this as a mandrel, and that'll kind of hold its shapes. Alright, so I'm going to try heating it up and bend it around. It's still kind of springy, and I can't get it to hold its shape, so I'm going to try this, see if it works. Okay, that actually worked pretty good. Just got to heat that other side up a little bit more. It's actually not too bad. I'll let that cool down and see if I can reform it a little bit more, and I'll work on it to get it to exactly where I want. Okay, so our shaft is shaping up pretty good. Now our spring it's a little long, which is fine. I just got to cut off the edge, but it fits around our shaft here, or our gear, the way I want it to. And now I'm going to try to reharden it. So I'm going to heat it up red hot, dunk it in this, dunk it in oil, and then we're going to temper it and see what happens. We're glowing red. Yep, see, it did harden it, but I just broke the goddamn thing. Ah! Okay, so now we're back for take 2 of this process. So I just remade another piece, I bent it to shape, and I just quenched it in the oil just like we did before. So now this is really hard. I don't want to break it again. So now we have to put some of the springiness back into this, because this is just too hard to be able to bend and clamp over what we need. So we have to temper this, and we're going to temper it to like a very, very dark straw or light blue color, and we're just going to do that with our torch. Now, after I dunked it in the oil, I just took some Scotch-Brite and cleaned this up, and we're just going to hold on to it. Okay, we just got a little bit of a bluish color onto there. And now, okay, so now this should be, now that it's cool, it should be, like I can squeeze it with my finger and it's not breaking now, but I can feel that it's hard, like it's going to be really hard for me to compress this. So this is going to be our spring. What I'm going to do right now is just run over to my grinder, and I want to grind this cut edge off, or cut it nice and round and just smooth it out, so when we put it over here, it just clips on nice. Okay, so I just rounded that edge off there. Okay, just on the grinder, and what we're going to do is take our shaft here and just put a little bit of oil on there. There is a wick inside this gear also. Install that, And then we're going to take a little spring here, clip that over, and line that up with the hole. Line that up with the screw hole. Take the screw. And just tighten this down. Now this is probably longer than the other one was, but this gives me enough room all the way around. You can see it wraps down to about here. It's almost 180 degrees apart from the other side. But so right now, actually right now it's in a detent. Spin fine, and where's the other detent? There is one right there. So that's actually the detent that it's in right now is the one that we cut. Okay, and it spins fine. And then if I pull it in, the detent that it's in now is the original one. So that's the one we cut. And that's the original one. And you can see now there's no, it takes some force for me to switch between them. So that's one, and that's the other. And maybe, okay, let me see if I can get this in a frame here for you. Okay, so the ball is right about here. Okay, that's where the little ball detent is, and it's actually proud of this surface. So that is why this side here has a gap. It's not touching like right here. I don't know if it shows up well on camera, but it's not touching the outside of this tube because the ball is holding it out. So right now it's actually in the gear, in the one that we cut. Now if I push it in, hopefully you can see that whole spring rise. Alright, you see it pull up, and then when I push it in, you'll hear it click and settle into the other groove and see that spring pop down. So right there. And then when I push it in again, alright, see that pop up, and then it'll settle into the other groove in there, and that sucker's in there. I mean, it takes a decent little whack to get it. Alright, okay, so this is the shot of the end of the lathe where that little movable gear goes. So in is usually for higher speeds, out is usually for lower speeds. So give it a little tug right in the detent there. Let me go ahead and turn it on. Not too bad. A normal gear noise, more or less. Now I can smack it in, and we reached our other detent there. And now what was happening before is if I had it in this high speed, it would kind of wobble around and move in and out, and also it would go in too far and it would rub up against the actual banjo metal itself and make a racket. So let's see how that sounds. Okay, not too bad. We're going faster than we were before, so that can be a little bit more of the noise. Sounds like one of the gears in there. I gotta fix the mesh a little bit. The only problem is these gears don't really move, so you really can't change the mesh. So if there's gear wear, you really can't adjust that out of it. So that's probably what that is on that inside gear, because that inside gear is definitely more worn than this outside one. So that might just be something that we have to live with. And I mean, we got like a tiny bit of wobble on there, but nothing I'm worried about. If this ever causes me a problem for any reason, I can just remake the shaft. We just did a nice repair with the braze and remachining it, trying to do as little work as possible for it. And we definitely got a usable product. everything's working fine here. That's actually not bad. That, I just disengaged my actual lever here. So the only gear noise that we're getting is from inside here. That's not too bad, actually, considering it's all open gears. Okay, so I'm happy with that repair. We made a repair with the minimal amount of materials and time and effort, at least in my mind. You could have done it, as I said, many ways. You could have sleeved it, you could have remachined the entire thing and got all of the wear out of the shaft and everything else, but, you know, for this machine, this is perfectly acceptable. That inside position is, in all honesty, not a position I'm going to be using very often. It is mostly for the higher speeds. My bigger concern was actually just fixing that ball detent spring. And while we were at it, we went in there and remachined that groove. So I'm happy with the way this turned out. For this machine, that's fine. I got a little bit of a clanky noise in the gearbox, but that's something I'm going to have to live with just from the wear and the age and everything on this machine. If you watch any of the rebuild videos, it's just something I'm going to have to live with. Perfectly serviceable. It's going to do what we want it to do. It's going to feed the way we want it to, and for what I'm making, it's going to be perfectly fine for the time being. So I have a ton of stuff that I got to do. Actually, I really got to clean this shop. I mean, if you can kind of see over here, you got a whole ton of stuff on this workbench. A lot of that is parts and future projects that are sitting up here. And I also got to go through the honey-do list. I got to make my wife a set of shelves, so that might be actually next video. Who knows? So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll be back with the next one, and hopefully it's something you guys enjoy. Thanks for watching. Don't do that at home, folks.